Hey y'all, welcome back to my She Reads series, cause she reads. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of the latest books that I finished, which is Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. Let me go get it. Okay, so this is the book. It is like quite a heavy, like hardcover book. It feels like almost like a textbook, like textbook adjacent. I gotta give the books a little smell. It also kind of smells textbook adjacent, like the pages are you know what I'm saying? Really thick and really nice. And then if you take this off, it's just black underneath, which I like because then it's just very like sleek and cute. Okay. So again, this is Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. And the reason why I chose to read this book is because I love Brene Brown. You guys have heard me talk about her before. This is probably my third book of hers that I've read. I read Daring Greatly, I read Dare to Lead, and now Atlas of the Heart. So it's, let me see, the subtitle is Mapping Meaningful Connection and the Language of Human Experience. So basically she names, I think, 83 or 80 something emotions. And remember, Brene Brown is a researcher, so this is all stuff that came out in her research. Was that there are about over 80 different kinds of human emotions. And so she goes through the emotions one by one. She places them in categories that are all like kind of similar, to make it kind of easy for the reader to follow. So she basically just goes through the emotions one by one. She explains what they are. She explains what they are, what they're not. She explains, what a near enemy of that emotion could be. And so it's really interesting. And then at the end of the book, she talks about how now that we have a framework of what emotions that we're navigating as a human being, how can we now use that information to create meaningful connection? So that was definitely the part of the book that I was most interested in. Also, this book's really beautiful. It's like really beautifully, like just the like inside cover, it's giving very like witchy vibes, which like I fucks with. And then she just has like really beautiful imagery in this book. Oh, I wonder if I can find the one where it's, sorry, my nipple's itchy. Maybe it's in Places We Go When We're Hurting. Did I just see it? Yes. Oh, this image. This is on page, girl, what page is this? Well, this is in the chapter Places We Go When We're Hurting, and she goes over the emotions anguish, hopelessness, despair, sadness, and grief. And she included this like really beautiful photo that's, oh, I could cry, like, and y'all know I love to cry. It's like Dark Elegy, sculptures by Suze Ellen Lowenstein, photographed by Karen Waldron. I think the story behind this picture is like there was some sort of tragedy. Was it a school shooting? Dark Elegy is made up of 75 larger-than-life size pieces, each portraying a mother or wife at the moment when they first heard the awful news of the death of their loved one. Okay, so this was about a terrorist attack, and this was an art sculpture that was done to memorialize that terrorist attack. And basically, it's like a sculpture of, I guess over 50 women mourning and it in anguish, essentially. And it's just like so powerful. Anyway, I do want to go through some quotes that I liked. I did highlight a lot, y'all. So let me see. Okay, I'll only let y'all know the good ones. Ooh, okay. So, and also too, if you have HBO Max, Brene Brown has an Atlas of the Heart special on there. So I definitely recommend watching that and seeing if you're into it. And if you're into it, I would suggest to get the book. Okay, so in this one, this is the chapter, Places We Go When Things Are Uncertain or Too Much. And she talks about stress. And she says, stressful situations cause both physiological and psychological reactions. However, regardless of how strongly our body responds to stress, our emotional reaction is more tied to our cognitive assessment of whether we can cope with the situation than to how our body is reacting. I found this really interesting because I always assumed that my emotions responded to my body freaking out, but really my emotions are responding to my thinking assessment of how well I can handle something. And I was like, right? Like, the way that stress is less about what's actually happening and more about your assessment of if you think you can handle that thing that's happening. And this is something that I've talked to my partner about and like talked to friends about and stuff, of like, one of the reasons why I love really sad, tragic movies is because it allows me like the understanding of knowing that I can get through something because I'm seeing someone else get through it. Yeah, I don't think we should be like hiding from the realities of life. I think we should see what's going on with them, like, and not be afraid of that kind of content that might be vulnerable or a little bit like sad or tragic. Like, I actually think that's a really good, like, part of our, like, a good part of a healthy media diet is to be like, okay, let me expose myself to real human beings who are experiencing real tragedies and who are getting through them. Ooh, she also talks about overwhelm as an emotion in here. And she says that the only antidote to feeling overwhelmed is to not do anything. Love that. Ooh, I thought this was interesting. She's describing anxiety, and she says that similar sensations are labeled anxiety when we perceive them negatively and excitement when we perceive them positively. So I thought that was really interesting, right? Like, the feeling you get when you're really excited about something and the feeling you get when you're really anxious about something are very, very similar feelings. Whereas the only difference is usually like anxiety is like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxious because I'm afraid of what's going to happen, or I don't know what's going to happen and the unknown is scary to me. Versus excitement is, oh my gosh, I'm excited because the unknown is unknown to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's interesting how certain situations we find the unknown to be exciting and thrilling and like, ooh, what's going to happen next? Versus the unknown to mean, oh my God, that's scary. Oh my God, something bad's going to happen. I think that is interesting to, when we are feeling those feelings, to try our best to like make that distinction. Oh my God. Okay, so I just had to highlight this page. This is in the chapter Places We Go When It's Beyond Us. And she describes the difference between awe and wonder. And she uses these really like beautiful comic strips to describe awe and wonder. Okay, so she says, when feeling awe, we tend to simply stand back and observe to provide a stage for the phenomenon to shine. How beautiful is that? And wonder inspires the wish to understand. So wonder inspires us to do something or to learn something. And so she has these like, yeah, so you can see like with awe, the guy is like he's looking at the stars in the sky, and he is just like engulfed with a feeling of awe. He's like a humble observer of something beautiful and phenomenal. Whereas with wonder, she is like in awe of the beauty of the butterfly. But in addition to that awe, she is using that to inspire her to learn more about butterflies. And so wonder is a little bit more active and awe is a little bit more passive. But I just thought that was so beautiful because I was like, oh my God, like I just want to live my life in awe and in wonder, you know? I forgot to mention this, but I also book clubbed this book with about like 4 or 5 other people. And so every week for 4 weeks, we got on Zoom and talked about, you know, the part of the book that we read and what we thought about it. And it was really nice to, you know, talk about a book with a group of people. But in this chapter, Places We Go When We're Hurting, she talks about hopelessness and how hopelessness is an emotion, but hope is not an emotion. I don't want us to get hung up on what is and isn't an emotion, but basically what she's trying to say is that hope needs to be like garnered. It needs to be something that we actively, intentionally work on. It won't necessarily just come to us like an emotion will. And she says here, setting realistic goals is a skill and a prerequisite for hope. And I just love that because, you know, it demystifies this idea of like, oh, hope, you know, all you need is hope and then everything will happen. It's like, no, you need realistic goals and then hope. I love when she talks about love, of course. And I also love that she quotes Bell Hooks in like the first section on love. She quotes the book All About Love, which I'm actually reading right now in my book club. So I can't wait to talk to you guys about that in a couple months. But she says, distinguished emotions researcher Barbara Fredrickson describes the umbrella term love as including the preoccupying and strong desire for further connection, the powerful bonds people hold with a select few, and the intimacy that grows between them, the commitments to loyalty and faithfulness. In Fredrickson's view, love permeates everyday interactions with others, ranging from strangers and acquaintances to friends and spouses, forming the emotional context from which to strengthen relationships. I love that. I love that definition because I think with love, it's like everyone just uses that word and no one like describes what it means to them. And I find it to be very confusing. Maybe I'm neurodivergent, but I'm like, what are y'all talking about out here? So I love that she like doesn't just give like one little definition. There's like multiple clauses in this definition to encompass like how people use it and what it means. Ooh, I like how, okay, in this chapter, Places We Go When Life is Good, she describes the difference between happiness and joy. And she says, with happiness, we feel a sense of being in control. Unlike joy, which is more internal, happiness seems more external and circumstantial. And I love that because I feel that, and that's what I've noticed as well. She explains that the Greek word for happiness is makarios, which was used to describe the freedom of the rich from normal cares and worries, or to describe a person who received some form of good fortune, such as money or health. Robertson compares this to the Greek word for joy, which is kairo. Kairo was described by the ancient Greeks as the culmination of being and the good mood of the soul. Culmination of being, good mood of the soul. Robertson writes, Cairo is something, the ancient Greeks tell us, that is found only in God and comes with virtue and wisdom. It isn't a beginner's virtue. It comes as the culmination. They say its opposite is not sadness, but fear. And I was like, yeah, I love that. My chair's squeaky, as usual. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Happiness is more so like freedom from money problems, right? It's more so like, are you working your life away like a slave, or are you able to like actually live a normal life, right? And then also the health thing as well. But joy being described as the culmination of being, good mood of the soul, only found in God and comes with virtue and wisdom. Its opposite is not sadness, but fear. And it's like, I feel that. Like, on a spiritual level, it just makes so much sense to me. Can I just say, like, my life, or not my life, but like my perception of religion, God, spirituality has changed for the better ever since I have like when I understood what God was or what God is, it was just a game changer because, you know, I didn't grow up with religion at all. Like, we didn't go to church. But I'm obviously living in the United States, which is like a very Christian forward culture. And the way that God was described to me from a young age from like the Christian culture is that he's a white man in the sky that tells you like not to masturbate or something, right? And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. That's not real. Sorry. But once I understood God to mean simply the connection that we all have with each other and with other beings, right? The acknowledgement that we are living amongst a universe that's more powerful than us, right? Like, and essentially God meaning the connection to self, the connection to consciousness, which also means the connection to others and to everything, right? Like, once I understood it to mean that, I just substitute that definition in every time I see the word God, and it just, it makes sense and it connects, and yeah, I'm obsessed. Not me just going through all the quotes that I liked, even though I was like, I'm only gonna go through a few, but they're all so good. Are we in the last? Yes. Okay. So the best part of this book, in my opinion, because the first like 90% of the book is just going through the 80 plus emotions, which sounds like a lot. It really isn't. It's very manageable. It's a really nice, easy read. And it just feels like a nice little guide, right? A nice little atlas of the heart, I guess, you know? And it feels like, yes, I'm a human being that experiences human emotions. Let me go grab a book about human emotions just to get a little, you know what I'm saying? Okay. So, and this is in one of the last chapters, cultivating meaningful connection, which again, I think is like the best part of the book. And like the point of the book for me is like, okay, how can we cultivate meaningful connection? And so she talks about near enemies, which is like, there's an emotion that sometimes we call this, but really it's this. That's what a near kind of enemy is. She says, the near enemies depict how spirituality can be misunderstood or misused to separate us from life. Okay, hold on. She says, I define spirituality as the deeply held belief that we are inextricably connected to each other by something greater than ourselves. Agreed. That was what I was trying to describe earlier. I have friends who are atheists who every day practice inextricable connection. They hurt when others hurt. They know that none of us are free until all of us are free. Simple, beautiful definition. That's spirituality, y'all. I have friends who talk endlessly about their religion and wear scripture on their t-shirts, yet demonstrate no connection to anyone's suffering but their own, and maybe that of the people in their immediate circle. I make this point because we're not talking about religion here. We're talking about the irrepressible human spirit. Let it. She says, without awareness, near enemies become the practices that fuel separation rather than practices that reinforce the inextricable connection of others. Okay, so for example, she says, the near enemy of love is attachment. Attachment masquerades as love. Okay, sorry. It says, I will love this person because I need something from them. Or, I'll love you if you'll love me back. I'll love you, but only if you will be the way I want. This isn't the fullness of love. Instead, there is attachment. There is clinging and fear. True love allows, honors, and appreciates. Attachment grasps, demands, needs, and aims to possess. Huh? I was just like, the articulation, like, because I see that. I see it in so many people's relationships, and yeah. And then she says, I needed the concept of near enemies because when it comes to cultivating meaningful connection, the far enemies, the real opposites, are not what get in the way most of the time. They're easy to recognize. We don't get tricked into believing that everything is okay. They are upfront with their disconnection. It's the near enemies of connection, the imposters that can look and feel like cultivating closeness, that sabotage relationships and leave us feeling alone and in pain. Beautifully articulated. Like, this is something that I've been trying to articulate in my mind for so long, and she just did it in a paragraph, and that's why we love Brene Brown, and that's why she gets the big bucks. Also, in the Cultivating Meaningful Connection, she says that one of the first steps to doing that is to develop what she calls grounded confidence. So she says, developing grounded confidence is driven by a commitment to learning and improving. Its near enemy is knowing and proving. Right? Grounded confidence, I'm going to repeat that. Grounded confidence is driven by a commitment to learning and improving. Its near enemy is knowing and proving. In our culture, we're quick to mistake knowing and proving for confidence when they're actually a function of low self-worth, right? Like, it's interesting because in our culture, we love somebody. I've noticed this in politics. I've noticed this in work environments. We love somebody who's like, I know everything. Here's what I know. I mean, they're not going to say that, but like someone who's like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. And this is what I think, as opposed to someone who's like, I'm not sure. Let me learn about that. Let me find out about that. We take that person as like, they're not confident enough. Like, they're not, when really that is confidence, being able to say like, I'm not sure, but let me learn about that. Having that humility, that's what confidence is, not pretending like you know everything. Y'all, I notice this in like corporate America a lot. This is something I feel like I can see right through. but she says grounded confidence is driven by learning and curiosity, even about our own bodies. For many of us, myself included, it's easier to live in our heads and be completely disconnected from our bodies. But there's a cost: insomnia, injuries, exhaustion, depression, anxiety. The body has powerful ways to get our attention. Love that. So she says that cultivating meaningful connection, step 1 is to develop grounded confidence. Step 2 is to practice the courage to walk alongside. And step 3 is practicing story stewardship. So with the grounded confidence, she also says that in order to have that grounded confidence, we also need to be connected to our bodies and be connected to who we are, what we want, what we need, what we don't want, what we don't need. And so she just talks about this term called disembodiment, which a lot of us are kind of in. Disembodiment as an unawareness, repression, or denial of our sensations and emotions, and or privileging our thinking over our feeling. Disembodiment often leads to an incongruence between the actions we take in the world and the beliefs that we hold. I just feel like she's just articulating so many things that I've been seeing and noticing, and she's articulating so beautifully and so easily. And it just, I don't know, reading this made me really sad, because I feel like in the current capitalistic system, so many of us are disembodied because we're overworked and we're underpaid and we're stressed, and we go home and we're stressed, and we don't want to be in our bodies. We want to numb ourselves and we want to disassociate. And she says that you can't have grounded confidence if that's what you're constantly doing. We need to feel our feelings, and we need those feelings to guide our decisions in some ways, but it's like oftentimes, like if everyone just stopped being so disembodied, people would quit their jobs, and not everyone can afford to do that, right? So it's like, I don't know, it just makes me sad. It makes me think about all the people out there who are really struggling and who don't have the privilege to sit and read a book like this and to work on what needs to be worked on. All right, so the second step for cultivating meaningful connection is walking alongside, which to me, it just sounds a lot like being empathetic, being non-judgmental to people around you, to your friends, to people you work with, whoever, your kids. And she says the near enemy of walking alongside is controlling the path, right? So do you find yourself walking alongside someone you care about and their journey, and being patient with their journey and being empathetic and non-judgmental? Or do you find yourself trying to control what they're doing? And then the third step, she says, is practicing story stewardship, which is essentially believing people. Believing people when they declare something about who they are or what they feel or what they think, and trying to not have judgment for that. That's a huge part of, if you want to cultivate meaningful connection with someone, you need to believe them. And that's something that I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot from different spiritual teachers that I follow. And also from like therapists and stuff. Like, if you've noticed, like a therapist will rarely like challenge you on their job is to believe everything you say and take and just go with what you're saying. The near enemy of story stewardship is narrative takeover, right? So if someone's telling me their story, instead of me believing them, I'm telling them, no, I think this is your story instead. And that's the story that I'm going to believe because it makes me feel better about myself. And there's a lot of that going on politically, but she talks about a cultural example of narrative takeover is the Black Lives Matter movement. Rather than listening, learning, and believing the stories of injustice, systemic racism, and pain, groups of white people centered themselves with All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. This was an attempt to, once again, decenter Black lives and take over the narrative. And that's why we love Brene Brown. Because, yeah. That's why I think it's so hard for so many white people or so many men to genuinely have meaningful connection with non-white people or women, is because of this part, right? Like, men don't believe us about our stories and our struggles a lot of the time. Obviously not all men. I'm not even gonna, right? And same with like white people often don't believe us about our stories and our experience, right? And so it causes disconnection. Yeah. I listen, I feel like this book, just for the last section on like steps on how to cultivate meaningful connection with folks, I just find it to be so valuable, so good, so juicy. And yeah, good for Brene Brown. Love her so much. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Thank you so much for joining me today. Next month, I'm going to be talking about the next book that I read, which was The Four Pivots by Dr. Sean Ginwright. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And I will catch y'all next time. Bye.